Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are, and welcome to NerdTube. We're here to talk about Dark Side of the Ring, episode 6, season 3. Got those wrong way around, I apologize. Grizzly Smith. I'm here with my usual cohorts. Shredder lives on. How you doing, my son?
Good to be here, Zam. This is going to be a very interesting episode. Lives up to the name
Yes,
Dark Side of the Ring.
for sure. Gary, how you doing?
I'm all right. This was a bit of a dart subject to other, so yeah, as well as good.
And yeah, for sure. And Jericho, how you doing?
Yeah, I mean, I just watched this episode, and to be frank, this episode kind of pissed me off, so that's how I'm feeling right now.
No problem. Now, before we start going on the play-by-play once again, we'll just talk about the episode, how we felt about it in general. I wasn't kind of surprised by the revelations. I kind of knew what I was going to be getting prior to this episode beginning. It's no surprise that Jake the Snake kind of went the way he did, and finding out about the other family members as well is absolutely terrible. What happened? This was an okay for me regarding the episode in general. It was an okay episode. I felt there was maybe more details that we could have gotten regarding all of this, but in a period of time of 45 minutes, we kind of strayed away from Grizzly Smith and we kind of focused on the rest of the children a bit and some of their downfalls. But yeah, other than that, it was an okay episode. Shredder, what do you think?
I have to say I thoroughly enjoyed this episode. It was a painful watch, but I did enjoy it because I'd heard the stories about Grizzly Smith in the past, but not to the extent that they were revealed in this episode. We had the Speaking Out movement last year, where there were all these revelations that came out about professional wrestlers on the independent circuit in America and here in Britain. But this is probably the closest America has maybe got to a Jimmy Savile. This was someone who was beloved in the wrestling industry in his day, and he was a big star. He knew people. He was well connected, but he was a rampant pedophile. And he had all this stuff going on even in his own home life. Again, this was... we will be discussing some very, very heavy subjects in this episode, so if you have been through anything like that or you are sensitive to these issues, then my advice is maybe please stop watching the stream. But if you are able to, then go out your way and watch this episode. This truly does epitomize Dark Side of the Ring.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I do apologize for not bringing that up earlier. It just slipped my mind. I'm glad you brought that up, Shredder. Thank you very much.
If I can mention one thing, he said this was like the closest America had gotten to like a Jimmy Savile kind of scenario. Yes and no. There was a scenario with the famous college football coach, one of the most let's say prolific, one of the most winningest head coaches.
Jerry Sandusky.
Well, Jerry Sandusky was the perpetrator, but there was a coach named Joe Paterno who basically was the head of an entire athletic department, and I mean, for that matter, I mean, he had the most power in the entire school, which means he had the most power in the entire town of in Pennsylvania here, because I mean, obviously these towns are small, they revolve around the school, the economies, all that stuff. So a man with all that power since the 70s basically swept child abuse allegations under the rug in the name of winning football games. So I definitely think that's at least prestigious enough to mention if we're going to mention in the entirety of America. But yeah.
You got anything more to say on him, Jericho, on this episode? Sorry, before I pass on to Gary.
Yeah, I mean, on the episode, Shredder said he enjoyed the episode. I mean, I can't say I enjoyed the episode just because of the content of the episode. I mean, I'll say that I appreciated watching the episode and knowing the information. I'm not happy that I watched the episode because obviously it's upsetting content. I know you got something to say after I finish.
No, I'm just going to say that's probably the better way to describe how I really felt about it. I did say it was a painful watch, but I think it's one that you really do need to go out of your way and see.
Yeah, and I mean, just the unfortunate thing to me was that I mean, obviously the perpetrator of all these actions is Grizzly Smith, but I feel that, I mean, I understand that it's his children, but I feel that the piece glorified Grizzly Smith a bit much at times, you know, and basically, and until they got into that, you know, until they got into the last 20 minutes or so, it was kind of, you know, just reminiscing on childhood and such. I wish if you were going to bring up this person, don't really try to, it felt like I was getting mixed feelings about the person, as far as the way the documentary was portraying it.
I mean, I mean, regarding that he's a paedophile, I don't think that particular light was not ever shed on him. We all know what a horrendous human being he was, but at the same time, it was just trying to remain a little bit neutral in how his life was. You know, that he was a wrestler, he did some stupid shit, you know, in back alleys where people were punching his stomach. I mean, that if that was the case, then there's neither a good or a bad to that. That's just what he was when he was growing up, if you know what I mean.
Fair enough. I just feel like it's glorifying a person who was quite honestly a monster.
If I could also interject, though, you generally find that people who have been the victims of abuse as children, they tend to have a very complicated relationship with their parents.
Oh yeah,
in many cases. For example, Jake's brother, who wasn't involved in professional wrestling, he got teary-eyed when he remembered the day his father passed away. But at the same time,
he was the caretaker for his father.
At the same time, though, he acknowledged that he doesn't regret being put up for adoption. He felt he was the lucky one. He avoided all of it.
Yeah. Okay. Gary, you got anything to say, mate, regarding this episode?
This episode gave me like three distinct emotions. One was anger, one was sadness, and one was joy. That the adult children have now to some degree overcome this and have moved past it and are now much better people because they've gone through this. So that was a good thing to see that I got a realization. Though I wish that this guy, Grizzly Smith, got punished in a legal way while I was alive. That's the only thing I wish, you know. And I think, as we go further into it, the anger I had wasn't towards him per se. It was to the fact that everybody in the wrestling business apparently knew about it and said nothing. There's a saying out there. I think it's evil happens when good men do nothing, and I think that is very much the case in this venture.
No, nobody. It wasn't a case of everybody knew Gary. Think of it as much like Jimmy Savile. There's a quote from Ian Hislop, the editor of Private Eye, regarding Jimmy Savile, which was that everybody had heard stories, but nobody knew. Anybody who knew should have been prosecuted. But again, you can't act on just rumor and innuendo.
Yeah, I agree, and I agree. And also, I don't agree with the times, but there were a lot more hush hush on those things back then as well. So this episode is called "In the Shadow of Grizzly Smith," and the Smith family, and I'm talking amongst the siblings, their pain runs deep, and it's time to tell their story. And what we find out very early on in this episode is from Jim Cornette, is that wrestling families were basically the people who ran the territories back way back in the day, because you were able to keep the secrets, keep kayfabe going. Jake the Snake Roberts, Rockin Robin, Sam Houston, they were brothers and sisters, but nobody knew that because they had different names and stuff, and it just kept things interesting. And like I said, nobody knew that they were related outside the industry. With the upbringing being the way it is, Aurelian Smith Jr., also now known as Jake the Snake Roberts, wanted to be in wrestling. Snake was driven by his father's rejection, hoping to hear praise, something he said he never got. Aurelian was dropped, but eventually he dropped the name Aurelian for being weak, and Jake the Snake Roberts was born, and he ended up being, I wouldn't say the most prolific wrestler, but definitely a renowned wrestler for a long time. So this opening section, before we start to get into Grizzly, what did you think regarding the fact that families were running territories and the way Jake was, that his name is Aurelian Smith Jr.? He doesn't look like an Aurelian Smith Jr. He looks like a Jake the Snake fucking Roberts. And how he was always trying to get his father's sorry, the word is just
approval.
Me right now. Approval. Thank you very much. He was trying to get his father's approval, but never ever got it. What do you guys think? I'll start with you, Jericho.
You muted.
No, I understand. Sorry, you got me.
Okay.
Yeah.
You want me to come back to you?
Yeah. I think
Okay.
that's a trope that kind of it's common. I'll say that's something that a lot of people fight for, as far as like getting affection of your father, or approval, or recognition, all that type of thing. But I mean, it just in Jake's case, I feel that it was really unfortunate, just due to the fact that he even mentioned in the piece, like, he would say to other wrestlers, he would say he was proud of everybody else. It wasn't like Grizzly Smith was just an asshole, or I mean, I'm sure he was, but it wasn't like he was, just doing this to everybody. He was single-handedly doing, or excuse me, he was specifically doing this to his own kids, and that's just. They talked about the manipulativeness of Grizzly Smith in the documentary a lot, and that's the one thing that I took away from. It's like, I mean, the guy is evil in my opinion, but he is cunning and he is clever, because I mean, he really did. He kept the control on these people, unfortunately, and obviously it's had a lifelong effect on them.
Yeah. Gary, regarding Aurelian Smith Jr., who ended up being Jake the Snake Roberts, he wanted his father's approval. He never got it. He ended up being Jake the Snake Roberts and became probably the most popular wrestler of that family, more famous than his dad. We also find out regarding the family stables back in the day. The territories were all basically family run, keeping it in the family, so to speak. Did you find any of these revelations to be new, or what have you got to say on all of this?
I mean, I already know about the Hart family. I already knew that his brother was, because I think Mick Foley mentioned that Sam Houston is I think he's his half brother in his book. I already knew that Rockin' Robin was his sister as well.
Mick Foley's half brother is Sam Houston.
No. What I said is that in Mick Foley's book, he has mentioned that that Sam Houston was Jake Roberts' half brother.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, that's fine. And I think that Jake Roberts is probably, next to Rowdy Roddy Piper, one of the best guys that using the mic ever, because he doesn't really yell. He talks quite gravelly, but the thing is, you kind of listen in and that kind of drags you out. He would raise his voice occasionally, but it'd be to effect. It wouldn't be all the time. But I think it shows you why he is the way he is, because he was looking for that approval from his father that he never got. And you can still see now that he still has a complicated relationship with his father, that he still wants to make him proud, but he still detests what he did. And I think with a lot of people, their relationship with their father or the mother can be like that. Even if they're abusive arsehole, there's some point that they want to please that person, because it's inbuilt in all of us to want to try and please our parents.
I agree. Shredder?
Well, the thing about families in the territories, that's common knowledge. The Harts up in Calgary, you had the Jarretts in Memphis, the Lawlers were in Memphis as well, the Von Erichs in Texas, the Guerreros in Texas. Jim Cornette was right. It's largely been family businesses in the territories, because you could trust family to keep the secrets. Now, with regards to the three kids that went into wrestling, Jake is the half brother of Sam Houston and Rockin' Robin. They both have different mothers. Grizzly Smith was the biological father of all three. Jake Roberts was probably, I want to say, the better character and the better storyteller of the three that got into wrestling. Sam Houston was probably technically the better in-ring worker, but he was of a much smaller size. I think that's partly due to an issue he had in childhood as well, because he had a issue in childhood where he nearly died on an operating table getting a tonsillectomy, and his muscles completely atrophied. So that may have contributed to him being as undersized as he was when you look at who his father was. But again, I wasn't surprised about the whole thing about the families running the territories. But I didn't know Rockin' Robin was related to Sam Houston and Jake Roberts. That was quite the revelation for me.
Really? For you? I'm shocked.
I did not know that. I genuinely did not know that. Rockin' Robin, though, had only been in the business for like 5 years.
Okay. Well, in this episode, we get introduced to Grizzly, and how he found wrestling initially was he would go behind walls and people would punch him in his stomach for like 25 cents, and they would try to get him to wheeze or to flinch or to fall on his knees or whatever, and it never happened. I mean, we're talking about a 7-foot plus brick shit house, so it was very hard to get a reaction out of him. But this got him noticed, him having people punching him being 7 foot tall. he got noticed and he became a wrestler. Not surprising. Now, I don't want to, like I said, we're not praising Grizzly here, as we know, but do you guys know much about his wrestling career at all? Any of you guys, before I continue?
Little bits and pieces, because there's people who say that they worked with him and said he was fine for a big man. Like, he wasn't Andre the Giant or a Bam Bam Bigelow or that level, but he was a pretty decent hand for a big man.
Okay, I mean, I'm thinking more like Big Show. Was he better? He wasn't as good as Big Show, was he? I mean, Big Show's one of the best big men wrestlers ever.
Big Show, WCW, no. Big Show, WWE, it's about the same level as that.
I would say think more sort of like a Giant Haystacks. If you've ever watched the old British wrestling tapes, this was a guy who he would just use his size to maul his opponents. There was nothing fancy about his style of wrestling, but he was a pretty safe worker from what I've heard from other people who've commented on him. And incidentally, Jericho mentioned that he felt that this in some ways did glorify Grizzly Smith. I would actually argue more that no, this was probably a more overall rounded picture. And if you really want to see a horrific glorification of the man, go watch Jake Roberts' DVD, Pick Your Poison, because they put that in a bonus feature about who his father was. Never mentioned any of the issues that they had.
Okay. Well, I don't know much about him as a wrestler, but in the 70s, he retired and he got into management. And this is where I started to think to myself, okay, you know what, who he's starting to remind me of? He's reminded me of the Mountain from Game of Thrones. You ever seen Game of Thrones? And you know who the Mountain is?
I have never watched an episode
of Game of Thrones in my life.
I
know who you're talking about.
He's a big, massive, like, power builder. I think he's, like, real name's, like,
I know you're talking about, but I've never watched Game of Thrones.
I wasn't thinking of the actor. I was just thinking of the character, because 3 different actors have played the Mountain. But he's just basically a very, very... In the books, he's, like, 8 foot tall. And he's just evil personified. You know, usually when you get somebody who's a big guy like that, they might be inside like a gentle giant. But no, this guy's evil personified. I mean, and Grizzly Smith reminds me of that. I mean, this guy rapes women and children and then kills them. And then you think of someone like Grizzly Smith, who's like 7 foot tall, using his size, you know, intimidating people, getting what he wants. You know, it must be absolutely frightening to be around this man.
I don't think it was intimidation, though, on Grizzly's part. I think it was more manipulation of the position he was in, and also keep in mind, you know, he was abusing children.
No, I
so
agree. But I'm sure
you don't need to be 7 foot tall in order to do that.
I'm just saying regarding the system that he was in, because he became a very powerful figure. Later on we're going to bring up the fact that he got Sam Houston out of prison several times. So I'm sure, like, you know, when you're an imposing figure like him, and then you've also like almost like a local hero, you can get shit done. And he just used all of his tools into great effect as far as he's concerned.
Well, he was such a revered hero that Cornette was it was in Bill Watts' territory, Mid-South. Cornette was supposed to do an angle where he was going to be out in a straitjacket, and he refused to do it because he thought, no, this is going to be the night I'm going to get cut, because I'm not going to have my hands free. I'm not going to be able to swing this goddamn tennis racket to defend myself. This is the night someone's going to cut me and cut me bad. He refused to do it. Grizzly Smith went out with them and agreed to basically put his arms around Cornette and hold him the whole time during that match, because nobody was going to touch Grizzly. He was so respected by the fans.
Interesting. And then once again, so you know all of this shit, and you didn't know Rockin' Robin was related to Jake
I didn't know that. I mean, Rockin' Robin was only in the business for like 5 years.
Fair enough.
One thing I will say about the power that a guy like that has is if Kane can get elected to a major metropolitan city's mayorship, I think that Grizzly Smith can get his son out of jail a couple times for DUI, especially back in those days when DUI really wasn't considered to be as serious as it is now.
But Glenn Jacobs is actually a decent human being.
I'm not saying that Glenn Jacobs isn't a decent human being. I'm saying that more to the effect of when you're a star like that, the power that you have and the name value that you have. I think if Glenn Jacobs wasn't Kane, he wouldn't be the mayor of Knox County. I'm not trying to take away from his efficacy or ability as a politician. I'm just saying that because of his name value is the reason why he's in the position he's in.
Trevor looks like he wants to say his thing before I.
No, that's fine.
But what I'll say is that I think it should. I think we don't know his. The only thing that I would like from this, and maybe you guys would agree and disagree, I'd like to know his own past, because a lot of times when it comes to abusers, usually in their own past, there's abuse that's happened to them, and usually it's a cyclical thing and stuff like that. Usually you hear that it's happened from their parents and stuff like that, and they've done it to them, and they just think that's normal. And I think that's probably the case with this. The fact that they don't go into that is a little sketchy. And I'd rather they go into, was there a history of abuse there, and did he learn that?
Well, Zach might have this on notes, but they did show tape of Grizzly actually saying that his dad would constantly give him a whooping. Would constantly give him a beating.
Any
mistake, or even if he just felt like Grizzly deserved it or needed it.
Yep.
Well, like I said, in the 70s, he retired, got into management. This gave him new power, new influence, and rumors would circulate about him about how old the girls would be around him. Baby Doll, who married Sam Houston, she remembers a moment where they would be on the road, because wrestlers, as you know, are considered on the road, but they would even do 40-mile detours and go arounds, because Grizzly would stop at somebody's house, pick up their young daughter, and then drive off with the girl, and the parents would be waving them away. I'm sorry for laughing, but I can believe it. You're giving this fucking man your daughter and you're waving away. Jesus Christ, that's just... I laugh at it, not with it.
Grizzly, by my understanding,
stupid.
Grizzly, by my understanding, was an ordained minister, and one of the things he would do to get these young girls to leave, and the parents would wave them off, is because they thought they were going to be doing religious studies for an entire weekend.
Plus, the thing is, you got to remember, as we said before, he was this local hero, and again, who are you going to trust? Is this guy who's literally in the ring? Is this glorified, Superman? Because literally, his own son, the one that was adopted, said, "When I grew up, my father was Superman to me," and that sort of for me, told me everything I need to know. That again, that the people who were around him all the time, glorified and worshipped the grandest man, Watson and stuff like that.
Jericho, you got anything to say on all of that when you found out? That you would be picking up girls from people's houses and their parents would be waving them away with smiles on their faces?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's completely ridiculous. That's fucked up.
Yeah.
But I just sorry, I'm trying to collect what I was going to say. I just had it. But basically what I would get at is that I think that people were a lot less, not even privy to information, because obviously people weren't necessarily, it's not like anybody had stone cold hard evidence hey, Grizzly Smith, pedophile. But I think that people were less aware, or people would, people wouldn't really look at red flags as much as they would now. I feel like, you had, what was it? Baby Doll. Yeah, you had Baby Doll saying, I was right there. I didn't get any of it. And it's man, if somebody that's in the car can't even understand what's going on, I can see how this guy got away with this for so long.
Well, Jake the Snake Roberts mentioned how his mum, who I believe was with his dad at the age of 13, gave birth to him at the age of 13, and blatantly said he was a paedophile. And
Jake mentioned this in Beyond the Mat as well. His Grizzly was dating his mother's mother, and he raped.
That's how it goes, isn't it?
Yeah, he raped Jake's mother in the other room.
I do remember him discussing.
Yeah, because what happened was that what happened, because this is on Joe Rogan as well. The person he was dating fell asleep, got drunk and fell asleep, and he went into her bed and raped her. It's ridiculously bad. How this was never reported or anything like that. It's just
So this is. I'm glad you mentioned this, because first of all, I forgot about Beyond the Mat. It's been about 20 years since I last saw it, and I'm pissed off with Dark Side of the Ring for not bringing this shit up. That he was going out with his mum, with his wife's, or his with Jake the Snake's grandmother. He was going out with her, and then ended up sleeping with his mum, who was 13 at the time, by raping her. I'm pissed off that the dark side don't bring up those sort of details, because we need to know, because it almost felt like they were together as some sort of union back then, because it was okay for 13-year-olds to be with guys. Obviously, that's not the case.
I think it's just. I think it's just the case that Jake didn't bring it up.
Fair enough. But yeah, she gave birth when she was 13 to Jake the Snake Roberts. Jake was living with his grandmother whilst he was growing up, but then his mum died when he was 11, and he ended up moving in with his mum, his actual mum.
His grandma.
Was it his grandmother who died?
Yeah, Jake was living with his grandmother until the age of 11.
But she passed away.
Yep, and she passed away, and then he ended up moving in with Grizzly and Grizzly's new wife, who ended up being the mother of his brothers and sisters, I believe. And
she was the mother of Sam Houston and Rockin' Robin.
And she was apparently molesting Jake, which was surreal. And she ended up getting beaten up by Jake's stepmother, was beating him up as well. And apparently, Jake thinks that all of this was manipulated by Grizzly in the first place. What did you guys think of all of this shit? Actually, no. Before I continue with that, if I pass it on, I just want to quickly mention Rockin' Robin as well. Rockin' Robin was being groomed by her stepdad for molestation. When Rockin' Robin, by
Grizzly.
Sorry, I don't know why I wrote stepdad. When Rockin' Robin's mother went to Grizzly, I'm sorry, I don't know what I wrote here.
Right.
Let me start again. Rocky Robin was with Grizzly, and her mother went out, and Grizzly was looking after her. And then Grizzly started, inappropriately touching Rockin' Robin, and he ended up being molesting her for 5 years. Once she finally told her mum this, that's when they left Grizzly Smith. Robin also then meets at 15 years old, meets Jolene, and we're going to get to Jolene in the next bit. But she meets Jolene, her older half sister. Jolene was asking Robin questions if she was molested, and then Robin realized that Jolene was also molested too. So regarding Jake, regarding Rockin' Robin, up to this moment, we're going to get to Jolene, so don't jump ahead, guys. Yeah. But all of this, Jericho, what do you guys think? I'll start with you, Jericho.
I'm sorry. One more time, the question. Just about
Rockin' Robin first being molested by Grizzly Adams.
Yeah.
She found out and then also meeting Jolene. Sorry, Grizzly Smith. Sorry. And then meeting Jolene and being asked questions by her, realizing that Jolene was also molested as well.
Yeah. What I'll say about that situation? I mean, obviously that's tragic. It's. I mean, there's not a lot else I can say about that. I mean, it's just really shitty. I mean, it sucks that it happened. What I will say is I was shocked to hear about, because we also brought up the part where Jake Roberts was kind of alleging that it was his mother, correct? His mother
His stepmother.
It was his stepmother. It was Rockin' Robin and Sam's mother that was apparently doing the molestation.
Okay, and then exactly, and then it was surprising to me for Robin to say, even after Jake says this, because I mean I don't think that Jake's embellishing this. I think if this would have happened, I don't think if this wouldn't have happened, he would have made it up. There's no benefit for Jake to say these things, and it was surprising for me for Robin to say, I don't think that she would have done, saying the stepmom, that she wouldn't have done those things to Jake, especially coming from someone with the experience of herself. That was really, it was just really shocking to me. I won't say eye-opening, but it was very surprising that someone could come to that conclusion after their experiences.
Gary?
Josh, I found this bit really hard to watch because I've got younger members of my family, not directly, not my children, but my nephews and nieces. And I couldn't picture anybody doing anything like this to them. And this is one of the few times that I got really cross because it's like, was no one around to protect these kids? Where was the mother? Blah blah blah. And I kept asking that question over and over again in my head. Where's the mother in all this? And I mean, Jake's mother and stuff like that. And I was just like, I started getting really cross because it's like this guy knew what he was doing, because Robin said that I think it was like a couple of weeks before he'd basically ignored her, basically like turned his back on her, and basically she was trying to get his attention and he would do nothing. And that's something that abusers will often do. That they'll make the abuse victim feel that it's their fault that they're not paying attention, and it's their fault that they're not do that, so they can exploit them, because they say, well, you love daddy, don't you? You'll do X because you love daddy. And again, that started to piss me the hell off. My sympathy went from like 0 to 1,000, because like thinking like, you're using what kids want is that they want your love, and you're using that so you can try and abuse it. I literally, if I could put my fist through the screen and pull him through it, I would have done it. I was really furious. Sorry, guys.
I just felt a bit sorry for Jake, knowing that he had nobody he could turn to. His dad was a fucked up person. His stepmom apparently did fucked up things to him as well.
Well,
beat him up and stuff. He had nobody to turn to. From
what Robin was saying, it's like he manipulated her to do that. And do you know what? There's part of me that believes that, because considering how massive manipulated this guy was, like he manipulated everybody that he knew. That's believable, especially to the person he'd married when I think she was very young as well. The wife of the mother of Robin and Sam Houston. I mean, I think she was like 21 when he started living with her. So God knows how old she was when they first met.
Shredder?
I'm not entirely aware of Jake's exact relationship with his mother. I know at one point he did live with her. He was very, very close to the man that his mother remarried. He's told the story about that before. Unfortunately, he tragically electrocuted himself in the basement, in the attic of their house. The whole thing with Grizzly and the molestation that was going on with the stepmother, I am and I'm not surprised that Rockin' Robin said she didn't believe it, because if you think about it, Rockin' Robin got removed from the household by her mother because she was being molested, so that might be why she doesn't personally think that her mother was capable of doing this kind of thing to Jake.
I can see that, yeah.
At the same time, I don't think Jake is making this stuff up. You can say a lot about some of the stuff Jake has said over the past. I mean, things like how he was going to, pull out a roll of quarters and punch the Ultimate Warrior in the face of the WWE Hall of Fame.
I still can't believe that.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure, but I can believe him hitting him, but I honestly don't think he would have done it at the WWE Hall of Fame. But you can say a lot about this, a lot of the stuff Jake has said throughout his life, but I don't think he's making it up on this one.
Okay, well, we're going to go into a little bit more about Jolene now, because 2 weeks later, after talking to Robin about their dad, she was kidnapped, and this made her youngest brother Richard, who we get to know a little bit more about now, made him mad because they were pretty close. You see an image of him punching a wall. Now, there was a Texas police officer, and this must be kind of unique, and this is where I'm starting to think of like No Country for Old Men and stuff like that, where you're in this quiet town, you've got a police officer for the sake of it, but fuck all happens, and now there's a kidnapping. And he recounts how he went to Jolene's house and found that the baby was there. They see letters from Jolene's husband's ex-wife. Apparently, I forgot if you just very briefly tell me, Shredder, what those letters were about before I continue.
She was Jolene's husband's ex-wife was basically threatening Jolene's safety. She was jealous of her.
Okay,
that's what the letters were about.
Well, she ended up being the prime suspect, and when police got hold of her, she did admit eventually that she did kidnap Jolene, but Jolene
the evidence was overwhelming. There was so much blood in the trunk of the car. That was what convicted her.
Yeah, but she also said
it's what convinced them that Jolene was dead. That even without a body, the amount of blood that they found was enough to convince them that Jolene had died.
Well, the ex-wife actually said that Jolene apparently allegedly escaped, and nobody knows what happens. But what the cops thinks is that at the ex-wife's place there was an incinerator, and she was probably thrown into that, and they burnt all the remains. I'm surprised there was
At
no
her work.
evidence. Yeah, at her work, but I'm surprised there was no evidence leading up to the incinerator, like the odd drop of blood or something like that. But maybe I'm watching too many movies. But but in court, when the verdict was given to the kidnapper, apparently Grizzly was looking to strangle this lady with piano wire, and there had be like several cops around Grizzly because he's a huge motherfucker, and if he kicks off, then they'll need more cops than ever just to stop him. But there were also rumors that maybe Grizzly set this shit up himself. Maybe he never expected her to get killed, but he did set this shit up himself, because he was worried about stuff getting back to him with his sister now talking so with his eldest daughter talking so much. So this whole chain of events, from the moment she was kidnapped, the ex-wife, Grizzly possibly being involved. What did you guys think of all of that? I'll start with you, Gary.
This was one point that I started to get like really sad. It's just like, an innocent woman had to die to protect this monster of a man from the abuse that he obviously was doing to both of his daughters. Like, Robin said that she wouldn't really talk about it and stuff like that, and then she seemed ready to talk about it, and then she goes missing literally as she's about to do it. It's like, yeah, it's definitely up. And I think that's really the overarching emotion I had with it was just like, I just wish that, like, I think he did know that she was going to murder her, because I think that he basically said to her, like, we both had this problem, make it go away, sort of thing. That's my gut, but again, I don't have anything but my gut.
Okay, sure. Shredder?
No, I don't believe that that Grizzly was involved with the kidnapping and the death of his daughter. Do I think he was maybe going to take some action? Possibly. I mean, he may have loved his daughter in some weird, twisted, sick way. Again, you do tend to find that with people who have molested their own children. There is some kind of warped, twisted mindset that they did this out of love, and that they are, very much in love with their own kids. So, again, I think the evidence that the police had was overwhelming. Obviously, forensics was not what it is now. So that's probably why they weren't able to find enough evidence at the incinerator to potentially convict the woman who did it. But I don't think Grizzly was behind the murder. But then again, when you've got all these stories firsthand about what kind of a human being your father was, then it is going to run through your mind.
Jericho?
I don't have a lot to say. I'm glad that Shredder brought up the fact of forensics. I think that was the reason why there wasn't, why it wasn't a murder charge. I'm sure there was a drop of blood or whatever, all that stuff at the crime scene, but there wasn't the technology to evaluate it. I don't think Grizzly Smith personally had his child killed, because I don't think that piece of shit would lose out on a paycheck to go to a court date, to be completely honest. I'm not even kidding. I really don't think that he would have he would have willingly lost money out if he didn't want to know who killed his child. And if he would have done it, he obviously would have known.
But the thing that made me think he did it was because, like, he wanted his persona as the best good guy ever to be attacked. And if his older daughter, who was getting to be, I think by the time she's died, I think she was like, what, in her 20s?
Yeah.
She would have been believed. And the thing is that, he didn't want that, the image that everyone had of it to be cracked in any way.
But Robin could have come out at this point as well. Robin could very easily have come out at that point as well and said something.
Look, I don't think he did it simply because that woman would have said something, because she would have known that Grizzly Smith would have been involved or something along those lines, and she would have given that up, and she didn't. And why would she go down for him either? It makes no sense. I don't think Grizzly Smith did it.
Okay.
Anyway, let's move on. Rockin' Robin continues her career in wrestling and got a job and got noticed by the WWE. At this particular time, Sam, Rockin', and Jake were all in the WWE. Sam was a great wrestler, but he unfortunately he started drinking, and he kind of ruined his career. Sam was avoiding jail for drink driving, but because Grizzly had lots of influence, but he ended up being a repeat offender, so much so that he couldn't get away with it. And finally, he went to jail, and he went to jail for 30 fucking years, which is unbelievable. I don't think
not quite 30 years. Yeah,
I think he got.
was
He could have been sentenced up to 30 years.
Yeah. Well, this is where he thought he hit rock bottom, and he tried to hang himself, and he failed at that too. And when the rope broke, apparently when he landed, he bruised his feet for about a week, which is unbelievable. So, sticking with Rockin' Robin though, she gets an unexpected visit from her dad, and he has a young girl with him. Knowing the history of her dad, when Grizzly and this young girl decides to leave, she makes sure that the young girl stays with her. This is when Robin's career unfortunately then hits rock bottom herself, because the women's division starts to fade out, and she herself starts to do drinking drugs. So regarding Rockin' Robin and Sam Houston, what do you guys have to say about all these moments? I'll start with you, Shredder.
Rockin' Robin actually made it to the WWF, I think, in her very first year in the business, 1987. She was there until, I want to say, about 1990, 91. This was, again, when women... It was a time when women were a feature attraction on the card. So you had the likes of Sherry Martel, you had the likes of Alani Kai, Wendy Richter, the Fabulous Moolah was still around. And, it was actual wrestling matches. Now, the matches, sometimes, weren't the best quality. You needed to have somebody like a Rockin' Robin or a Sherry Martel in there to have a decent drag-out match. But it wasn't the days of the Diva Pillow fights. It was when it was somewhat still respected, and women in the wrestling locker room were viewed as more of sisters in that fraternity. But Rockin' Robin, again, she lasted about 5 years in the business. She left, I think, after she left the WWF, she had a small stint in Herb Abrams' UWF. And but after that, about 1992, she was done. She went and worked in real estate.
Shred, when they mentioned her having a dark match with Sherry Martel,
yes,
I would have loved to have seen that.
Oh, I think we all
I
would
want to
have,
see that match now.
Yeah,
I want to see that
would have been
match.
great.
I think you'll probably find, if you look through the WWE network or Peacock or whatever, if you go through, you'll probably find a couple of matches. I know there's not a lot of women's matches televised from that era, but you would probably find a couple of matches with the likes of her and Sherry Martel. Sam Houston, again, he was probably the best worker of all three. In ring, he was a great technician, but the problem was, again, he was undersized. And unfortunately, unlike Jake, I mean, Sam Houston's entire gimmick was that he was a cowboy. And, that's not going to reach... yeah, it's not going to reach a global audience and cut through and resonate with people as much as Jake Roberts and his promos did, because he convinced you he was a psychopath. That, deep down, he was a stone cold killer.
That moustache and mullet would do that, mate. Gary,
not just that, but you listen to his promos, that gravelly voice, and the inflection in his voice and the mannerism he would speak in. I mean, he was someone who just came right through the camera at you.
It's very good that he's able to do all of that, but then you need to look as well, and you put a moustache and mullet with that personality. No doubt people think he's a fucking psycho. Gary, you have some things to say. First of all, about Baby Doll.
Yeah, the fact that she brought up the fact that when we got married, I thought he'd love me, but I realized very quickly the drink was always but that was really sad to hear that, despite the fact that he had this amazing, beautiful woman that any male wrestling fan would give their left hand to have, because I think Baby Doll, I'm not sure which territory was it Mid-Atlantic, I think. Yeah, it's
Jim Crockett Promotions.
Yes, so that's Mid-Atlantic, I think. Yeah, so she's a gorgeous woman, and literally he could not give up his demons for her. That always makes me upset when you meet somebody who any guy would give their left nut to be with.
Yeah.
and you fuck it up because of like the demon trick.
People like him are getting groupies left, right, and center. You know, what I mean, you heard what Jake said. He'd be fucking 1, 2, 3 fucking dogs and birds. You know, what I mean, he'd be fucking everything, man. You know, people like Sam as well. You're probably getting a smorgasbord of fucking panani.
But yeah, to this point, Sam Houston was always a really, really good worker. Again, I never actually saw him actually work, but I've heard stories that he was a really, really good worker. I always thought like Jake was underrated in his work. You know, like I mean, until the drugs and the drinks up there. Till and then we're talking about like his WCW run, and like, later on in the game. But when he was kind of right, he was really good. Like his matches with the Undertaker, his matches with TBS and people like that. I mean, Macho Man, he was always really good and on point. Rockin' Roman, again, I think I've seen a couple of the matches, if I remember right. And it's a shame that, again, like, I think what really stopped her wrestling career was the fact that WWF stopped, from what Jericho was saying, stopped doing women's matches, which I thought that was really stupid of them. Because, again, that was something.
Stopped it, yeah.
Yeah, so I thought that was a bad idea, but I mean, I'm sure there was a reason for it. Maybe they were getting low ratings, or maybe that just like Vince McMahon and his like pure male lust got ahead of him. I don't know.
Jericho.
Yeah, I just I think that it was really sad that all the members of this family had this alcoholism that they had to deal with. Obviously, Jake was a little bit more than alcoholism; had a little bit of a drug problem as well. But it seems to have run in the family, unfortunately, and it seems like obviously they all had trauma that they were trying to, try to cope with. Unfortunately, they resulted to alcohol with it. The one thing that I'll say about Sam Houston, I'll say the same thing that Jim Cornette said in the documentary, and it's that if you got caught doing something 20 some odd times, and especially like I said, especially back in those days, because back in those days, I mean, if you got pulled over for DUI, 4 out of 5 times the cop would just say, hey, just stay on the side of the road, don't, sober up and then go home. They didn't really enforce it that much. So for the fact that he got caught 20 times doing something that they didn't really even enforce at the time that heavily just shows to how fucking egregious that guy was. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm sure that Sam Houston is a good person. The lack of judgment and the lack of care that has to go into being convicted of DUI that many fucking times is honestly malicious at that point. It's malicious.
But you look at how many times, say, a politician's kid will get off with it.
Oh, I understand. Yeah, I'm not trying to equate it.
It's a case of if you think if your father knows people and you can get off with it, chances are you're probably going to do it.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I don't think
to mind.
I don't think it takes away from the just the crassness of it, the lack of value of human life.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the trauma that we're all going through, Jericho, but Zam, you've completely skipped over something which I don't know if you've got it on your notes, is the fact that Grizzly used to traumatize his kids by working the angles when he was at home.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did.
Oh, by not telling them that it was kayfabe.
Yeah, he would work the angles. He would wear neck braces.
Jake Roberts really
Jake Roberts thought his dad was getting beaten up by the same people.
Yeah, well, he was being beaten up by the same people, but not only that, but obviously his dad was moving territories. So in Jake Roberts, as a kid, Aurelian Smith's eyes, he's seeing his dad getting chased by these people who are ruthless, beating him to a bloody pulp on national television, no less. These people aren't scared of any repercussions. They want to do it in public. And obviously for an 8, 9, 10-year-old kid that's got to be terrible. He said in the documentary that he cried himself to sleep many a time. And, I mean, just as a father, I don't understand how you can put your kids through that. I mean, being a father, I don't understand how you can. I'm not a father. I don't have kids.
You got off on it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, it's just disgusting. I don't understand how somebody could have that type of reaction in their fucking brain that they would want to do that.
And there's so many old school wrestlers who have said either they didn't let their kids watch it, or they would let them know, look, Daddy's playing. I'm fine.
Yeah. I mean, look, we just talked about Mick Foley not even a week ago, and how he had this brutal match with The Rock in front of his fucking children, where he's getting hit over the head 9 times because he's handcuffed behind his back. And before and after the match, these kids are 3, 4, 5 years old, and Mick Foley, Now, The Rock is Daddy's friend, right? The Rock
Yep.
wouldn't really hurt Daddy. I mean,
Yeah.
and this is what, like 10, 15 years afterward. So no, this isn't the industry itself. This is a fucking disgusting piece of shit that was unfortunately a human being and birthed other human beings as well.
Well, we're going to mention Jake the Snake Roberts here. He did everything crazy and admitted he was a hardcore coke addict. Like, everything else was secondary. Man needs
His
to
number
coke.
one priority in
There-
life was
yeah.
cocaine.
If I don't get any snow, we ain't going to get a fucking show. And he mentioned all the orgies and the freak show parties he did. I mean, some of the stuff he was talking about, like 1 minute it'd be fucking one girl, then it'd be fucking two girls, and it'd be fucking a girl with a lampshade over his head, then they'll bring a bird and a fucking dog. And then I'm thinking, what the hell? We see him in his latter years doing Heroes of Wrestling, fucked out of his face.
And want to play 21?
And like he's like getting members of the audience to touch him up and stuff like that. He's absolutely wasted. He's using the snake, using a poker trickster. There's like some sort of mock, like some sort of penis sort of, innuendo going on there, and like licking it and shit. Oh my god. Yeah, but it's funny in a way because Snake, after all of this and admitting all the crazy shit he did, he admits that he was a liar, he was a thief, he was a junkie, he was all of these things. And it's good that I'll mention him a little bit later regarding his recovery, but he did a lot of crazy shit, a lot of crazy shit in various ways. When you mention the thing he did with ravishing Rick Rude, I'm sure if he didn't have the sort of upbringing he did, he probably wouldn't even think about doing something like that. Maybe
I would
maybe
have
I'm
seen
giving him
human
a pass.
being do so.
Well, it depends.
Yeah,
I mean, there's been other ribs like that, from other guys. So it makes me kind of think,
I guess maybe
maybe
a rib
would've.
like that. I mean, it's funny in a way because a rib like that would work maybe on somebody who is more accepting of a rib like that. It wouldn't be good to do that to someone like Rick Rude.
Rick fucking Rude, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
a guy who legitimately could beat the shit out of you with one arm tied behind his back.
And also, you know who he is as a person, that this is just a gimmick he's playing, and he loves his wife and his family.
Yeah, he's not a shithead. He's not a legitimate shithead.
Yeah.
He's a decent human being.
Yeah, and he's a religious man too. So if you want to respect all of these things, why the hell? But this is like Jake the Snake. So, and it's funny in a way because Jake the Snake's persona is really not. He's a lot more down to earth in a way. Easier. Sorry, down to earth is the wrong words to use. Maybe, but he's a lot more easier going, a bit more authentic as a human being. Like, he comes across as a mean. His gimmick in a way. A lot. I've heard people say that you don't know where the gimmick ends with Jake the Snake Robert, but you see him in recent interviews. Maybe because he's no longer on drugs anymore. He just seems a little bit more human, if you know what I mean. But regarding all of this, because we're getting close to this, I'm gonna mention this. I'm gonna mention the whole thing now, and then we can talk about it. Yeah. On June the 12th, 2007, Grizzly dies of Alzheimer's. His son Richard, who he actually put up for adoption, ended up being the person who ended up being his sole carer. Prior to his death, the siblings were asked if you think his father had any regrets before he died, and a lot of them said no. Baby Doll actually also mentioned that the way Grizzly had manipulated people like Sam, that if when it came to some of the molestation regarding her Sam's sister, Sam would probably blame her sister than blame Grizzly Adams, because Grizzly Smith, because Grizzly had such a hold over the rest of the family. Unfortunately, at the end of the video, we never saw the Smith family reunite. I actually thought we were going to get to see all of them come together, which would have been great.
That was going to happen too.
But unfortunately, that never happened. There is still time, though. Maybe after the documentary, now the documentary's been aired, there's a possibility. But the best thing about how this episode ended was just seeing maybe Jake the Snake in a good place, in a better place than he's been in a while. And he's got a lot of support. People like DDP, what he's done for this man, it cannot be stated enough. How lucky he is to know somebody like DDP, who's been in the industry, who knows anything, will know what Jake's going through.
Not just Jake, all three of them have cleaned up their act, because Sam Houston, again, he had
he's out of jail.
Issues with drinking. Yeah,
yeah.
He's out. He's clean. He's sober. They didn't mention the fact he does. I think he runs a horse sanctuary for abused horse. Yeah, he basically rescues and rehomes abused horses. He does some ministerial work as well. Rockin Robin has also cleaned up her life, and I think she's in real estate. Both of them tragically lost everything in Hurricane Katrina. They
that's horrible.
Both Sam Houston and Rockin Robin lost their homes in Hurricane Katrina.
Yeah, one of the most unluckiest families, famous families ever.
You did skip over something though, Sam.
Please.
You did mention the fact when Rockin Robin was older, and her father came in with this like 9-year-old little girl.
I mentioned that.
She did mention that. Yes.
I mentioned that,
but we didn't discuss it.
We didn't discuss it that much. I mean, there's not much to say.
I mean, do you think that the old regrets about not reporting Grizzly before his death? Because that's what I generally think that they all wanted to say, is that I wish that I'd said something. And I think that Jake would at the end that he's like saying, if this is happening to you, run. And I thought this was like Jake is most poetic and truthful, and I wish that somebody had reported this fucker before he died. But
I almost think that it's almost common knowledge, like an unwritten rule, a hush thing that is, but people accept that if you're rich and powerful, or you have a lot of influence, you might fuck kids, and people are okay with that. Back then,
it's not just that. There's also the fear from the victims. Are people going to believe me, or am I just going to get branded a liar? There's there's a whole onion worth of layers of fear and doubt and paranoia that would go into go through the minds of people who have been abused as children when it comes to actually reporting what happened to them.
I do want to have a little bit of a laugh here regarding Jake Roberts' time in the hero of wrestling, because I couldn't help but laugh when I see him holding the fucking lizard like this and trying to lick it like it's a dick, or holding it around his crotch pretending it's a dick. If that doesn't get you a laugh, nothing will.
That was a low point in his life.
Oh, it was a terrible low point in his life, but I think he would laugh.
I laugh at it now, knowing where he is now.
Yeah,
because it's sometimes
it's a redemption.
You can look back at you can look back at your life and laugh at it if you've become better from it, and he has.
That promo, that promo that I was quoting, if you haven't seen it, it's sad to see, but it is comical.
There was one sad clip I saw of him. He's wearing red trunks and he's trying to get into the ring, and he can't lift his leg above the second rope. I'm sorry for laughing. He can't lift his leg above the second rope. He can't get in the fucking ring.
Well, I think the final stop button for him, for Jake, was I think there's a match that it shows in the Resurrection of Jake the Snake where I think he'd been drinking like small bottles of vodka, and I think it's about like 8 or 10 of them around where he was. And literally, the guy could not stand up straight. He literally was like wheezy, and then whoever he's facing basically power slams him and keeps him down for 3, and then he cuts a promo on all these people, and this guy comes out and punches him out again. And
that's not the only instance of that. I mean, there's been stories from just about probably every independent promoter in the United States of Jake the Snake Roberts being fucked up or making some insane demand. Again, going back to Beyond the Mat, there was a promoter who was interviewed for that, and he said that Jake had called. He said he wanted his retainer, so they sent him his retainer. He then phoned back and said straight up if they weren't going to get him some crack, he wouldn't show up.
I've heard of this. Yep.
Do you think that the reason why he's alive, because it's amazing, of all the wrestlers who are dead, he's not one of them. So do you think the reason why he's alive is that he never did performance enhancing drugs?
No, I don't think it's anything like that. I mean, some people.
I think it's genetics more than anything, honestly. I really do. I think it's genetics.
Look at Keith Moon. Well, sorry, Keith Richards. I should say Keith Moon's dead, but Keith Richards.
Yeah, Keith Moon. Unfortunately.
Yeah. look at Keith Richards though. Keith Richards from the Rolling Stones, and the amount of drugs that man has done, he should have been dead 50 times over.
Yeah, fair enough. I also think that maybe Jake the Snake is cursed with bad. I mean, someone like me who doesn't believe in curses, but I'm using it as a phrase. In the sense
I mean, look at what happened with the Warrior. I mean, the guy's had a shitty hand.
No, or Warrior had earned more money than Jake could ever dream of.
I'm
But what I'm
saying,
trying to say,
look at the scenario where Warrior fucked over Jake Roberts at SummerSlam
yeah,
because Jake
yeah,
was going to
I
get the
agree.
champ. Yeah.
Well,
And I agree. I just
that's
thought that Jake is
disputed.
constantly.
Okay. If you take Jake's word for it, in that
Yeah.
I mean, it's good to see that Jake is lucky now to a degree.
yeah.
But I think he was living. He lived so long because someone like him, unfortunately, has to live through so much shit, and
I,
that's his punishment in
I
life.
also
Which is
feel like I also feel like someone who had the level of hatred that Jake Roberts did for Grizzly Smith and for, I mean, for lack of a better word, self-pity, because he knew how fucked of a situation he had kind of had. Jake Roberts was a selfish guy, at least during that time. He's obviously redeemed himself.
It was a
Um,
love-hate relationship with Grizzly because
yeah,
Jake wanted his love so badly,
yeah,
but he also did have something of a relationship with Grizzly even in his
yeah.
later years because
In
Grizzly
his
got him.
later years, yeah.
I think Grizzly got him into the WWF, and then Grizzly when Jake decided to go and leave and work at WCW, Grizzly was working there, and he's the one that negotiated for Jake to come in on this big big contract, which I think was for about $3 million over
Oh
2
wow.
years.
Oh wow.
And that's when Bill Watts came in
Yeah.
as the new head booker at WCW.
Mhm.
He looked at Jake's contract and said, "You ain't
Yeah.
worth this," and
No
he ripped it
way.
up.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
And
He did.
Jake went up. He couldn't go back to the WWF because he'd held him up for his release,
Hmm.
but he wound up getting reduced to something like 200 grand a year.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really shitty. But I think anyway, the reason that I brought this up is to say I think that type of motive, that like hatred or that love hate, how you're phrasing it, that type of relationship, I think that really motivates someone, and I think that gives them a determination. And you need that to live. You see a lot, people retire or something and they kind of just like go off and die because they don't keep those social relationships, or they don't have a reason for living, so to speak. That was Jake's reason for living, was to prove his father wrong, was to try to get the acceptance of his father, that kind of thing. And I think that really just really speaks to who he is. I also thought it was interesting. I don't know if we brought it up or not, but I like to mention the fact that all four of these people were working in the same company at the same time.
yeah.
So
You
that was
mentioned that.
really okay. That was just with this whole relationship dynamic. That was shocking to me that these four people could coexist. I mean, obviously, they're not on the road together, they're not rooming together, but the fact that they could all be in the same workplace, the same organization, and everything, for lack of a better word, not to hit the fan, is amazing to me.
Bossman, you got anything to say?
No, I think that they covered it all.
Pretty good. Okay, Shredder, yourself.
No, I don't think I've got much to add to it. I will say I'm not entirely surprised that they could coexist in the same company. I mean, Grizzly was Office, but I don't think it really mattered to any of the three of his kids. They, as far as they were concerned, they were working for Vince McMahon.
Fair enough.
Rockin' Robin, it was never really acknowledged that she was related to Sam Houston or to Jake Roberts. Sam Houston and Jake Roberts, people in the industry knew that they were half brothers. But again, I think it was just a case of, okay, well, we may not get along, we may not be that close, but we can still work in the same company as
Yeah,
each other.
we
I
can
mean,
coexist.
Dory Funk and Terry Funk, for example, they, fought like cat and dog backstage, but they still were able to coexist and work together in places like Japan and WCW.
Yeah.
Did Jake and Sam ever have a match in the WWF?
That they're
I
close.
believe they tagged together once, but that's pretty much the only interaction I'm aware of.
Interesting. Okay. Good job. All right. Thank you very much for watching. Have a nice day, everyone. Gary, Shredder, Jericho, thank you very much. We'll see you guys next week. Oh, actually, is there a biography coming up?
Oh yeah, there will be. I don't know who it's
Which-
on, but it'll be there.
Well, next wrestling documentary, you'll see us. Don't forget to subscribe to NerdTube. Bye-bye.
Danny biography on Monday. Bye bye.